It's great to be here in Skibbereen today to participate in the TED conference. I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me. I'm going to, in some respects, try and break the Guinness Book of Records in terms of what I'm going to try and present to you today, the amount of ideas and information that I'm going to present in this presentation in 17 minutes. So I hope that it will get you thinking outside the box. I set up Partnership for Change 2 years ago, which is all about change in our community, coming up with new ideas, looking at the idea of a low carbon future. So my presentation is all about this, opening a door to the future in terms of an alternative future to the one that we see today, and hopefully one that is more positive. But first I'm going to step back into the past, because as was mentioned in the last video, we can learn a lot in terms of how history has impacted on us today. In 1840, Ireland was the most densely populated country in Europe. That's hard to imagine, considering today we're actually one of the least densely populated countries in the world. A lot of us in West Cork and in County Cork believe that Cork is the capital of Ireland. And historically, there's some reason for that, because in 1840, Cork had the largest population in this country. It had a population of 850,000 people, which was 3 times that of County Dublin. So that's the census map that shows the population of Ireland in 1840. And if you look at today, you can see the red areas are the areas that have the highest population. The highest population 150 years ago was on the west coast. Today it's on the east coast. So I was looking at it last night in terms of looking at the theoretical population of Ireland if the famine hadn't happened in this country, and if nearly 5 million people hadn't immigrated between 1820 and 1980. That's the 5 million who just immigrated to America. You would have a population in County Cork in the region of 3 million people. Now imagine how our society would look, how Cork as a region would look in that context. Dublin would have had a population of just over 1 million, which is what it is today. But Cork would be the capital of Ireland because it would have a population 3 times that of Dublin. And there is the population again, as from the census in 2006. Now, the reason I'm showing population is because this century we're going to be dealing with a lot of issues, and population density or population growth is one of them. The areas in red are the areas that have the highest population in the planet. Ireland is one of the least densely populated, as I mentioned earlier. And when we talk about climate change this year, or this century, the areas that lie within the 2 red lines that you see here are the areas that are going to be most at risk, and they're also the areas where most of the population in the world live. As you can see here, very squeaky table. Natural disasters. We've had one just this last week with Iceland, and we've seen the implications for it in terms of air travel. But in 2009, we had a huge number of natural disasters, and this year we've had Haiti, which had one, and the implications for human society this century are huge as population continues to grow. But I want to look at energy and energy in transition, because as populations grow and our use of energy continues to increase, we have to find alternative sources, especially when we're dealing with the risks of peak oil and of climate change. Now, a few years ago, I was very privileged to move back to West Cork, and I came back because I came to work for one of the most innovative companies in Ireland at the time, which was SWS. It was a cooperative movement owned by the co-ops in West Cork, and it's a pity in many respects. I think it's one of the greatest travesties of the Celtic Tiger that this cooperative was sold into the private sector, because it was owned and operated by a cooperative movement. And I believe that the future for communities is community-based cooperative energy systems being developed in this century. I'm going to look at tidal energy. Ireland has the potential to develop tidal energy. This is a map showing the tidal energy resources around the world, and you can see Ireland there is in the dark blue area. This is another map showing the areas around the British Isles and Ireland where there is potential for tapping into that vast resource of tidal energy, which is a clean, alternative, renewable energy source. 2 years ago, I went up to Stratford Lough to have a look at this tidal turbine. The ESB have bought into that, thankfully, and are buying electricity from it. It was the first tidal turbine that was introduced in Europe. There are a whole variety of different types of wave turbines that are there. Most of them that are on the market at the moment are very similar to wind turbines in the sense of that they use propeller blades. You have a Stingray here, which is a new design which doesn't look at blades at all. It looks at hydrophiles instead of turbines. This is another one called a snail-type tidal connector generator. Other ones here again where there's not necessarily turbines in the same capacity as what we would normally see. And this is another one, Rotec tidal turbines. Very innovative one because in this instance they can actually remove part of the turbine while it remains on the seabed and not have to, from a maintenance point of view, remove the entire unit. Then you've got wave energy converters like these that are being developed. And where we see in West Cork, fish farms, I'd say this century and in the coming decades, we're going to see wave farms that will look in some respects quite similar to the fish farms that we see in some of the bays in West Cork. That looks very like some of the areas that you see down around Water Bay. The oyster wave power device is another example. Then you've got a point absorber wave energy. They don't use turbines. It's basically using the power of the movement of water and pulleys, and basically you've got devices that float on the surface and the energy of the water converts into electricity. You've got an Irish company called WaveBob, which is after getting significant funding from the Irish government for generating electricity or renewable energy. And then you're getting into the more I suppose, high-tech science fiction types of tidal energy that exist. And this is one, the magnetohydrodynamic technology. It was originally a military design that was used for looking at creating silent submarines during the Cold War. This is off Scotland. And when you look at West Cork and the island communities in West Cork, this offers potential in terms of providing sustainable renewable energy for the likes of Cape Clear and Sherkin Island. It's a land-installed marine-powered energy transformer. And basically, the concept is that water comes in, you have air pressure, and electricity is generated through a turbine, through air pressure. Then you go into concepts like the ocean thermal energy conversion, which basically looks at the concept of, in the oceans, you have temperature variations between the surface and deeper down in the sea waters, and you're converting that energy difference into electricity. It's a very novel design, and 2 pilot plants were built using this technology off Hawaii and another one in South Pacific by the Japanese in the late 1970s during the OPEC oil crisis. You're looking at also the vortex-induced vibrations. There's absolutely no turbines involved in this. This is about the movement of water over structures that create a vortex, and you use that energy in the vortex to generate electricity. That's the principle in which it works. Then a very novel idea is the transverse horizontal axis water turbine. Again, no blades. This is a remarkable one because it generates electricity at considerably less cost than the traditional marine turbines that we've seen just earlier, and can be used in shallower waters and therefore has far greater application in terms of marine turbines. Tidal barges. I was working on a project a few years ago, again with an Irish company, the Fleming Group, on building a tidal barge in Wales. Saltwater osmotic power generation. We have plenty of salt water. We're an island nation, and salt water basically uses, in this context, you use osmosis to generate electricity. This is a concept that's being developed in Norway, and they believe that they can generate 10% of their energy in Norway from using osmosis technology. And you could have a situation where if you look at the River Shannon, for instance, and you've got a city alongside it, Limerick, that the fresh water from the Shannon that is flowing down the river, as it enters the sea, you could have an osmosis plant there that could generate enough electricity for Limerick City. When we look at wind energy is an energy that has developed significantly in Ireland over the last few years, and we have a huge resource of it here. But there's some very novel ideas that are out there now in regards to wind energy, and one of them that I'm particularly interested in is the Kite Energy concept, because there's a company from New Zealand who have developed the idea of using kites instead of turbines, so you don't have to build the infrastructure in terms of large steel structures for turbines, and the nacelles and everything else that goes into it, the embedded energy that will be involved in it. They're looking at the idea of using kites that can be flown at high altitude where the wind is flowing at maybe 10 times the speed that we would have above land, and tapping into that constant energy that's there and generating electricity at 1/10 of the cost of what it would cost to build a wind farm. And Google, one of the world's most innovative companies, invested 10 million euros in that company just last year. Wind and compressed air, another example. When you've got wind and you don't have the demand for power, you use that energy and you compress air at depths underground, and then use that air pressure to generate turbines, or to be used in turbines when you need it. Wind batteries, there's a company from Australia that, again, you look at, say, the likes of the island communities, the larger Ireland, but also the smaller islands like Cape Clear and Sherkin. You use wind batteries. They developed it in an island of Australia, and that technology has advanced considerably in the last number of years. And an American company recently spent 6.3 million euros on a contract using that technology for a wind farm in Donegal, so that they'll be able to sell electricity at peak times, have it stored in batteries using this lithium-ion battery technology, and selling it into the grid to make the most money at the highest times of use. Another obscure and interesting one is clatrates, methane clatrates. You see a little black dot there off the Irish coast where they show that there's an example of a location where we could tap into this resource. It's a huge resource of energy, of methane. It's normally found in areas like Siberia or northern Canada, but it's also found at sea. Algae biofuel, again, a very innovative and worthwhile technology. There's a number of Irish universities recently got a grant. 6 universities between Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Sligo IT and Dundalk have got a funding off the European Union and the Irish government and the Scottish government to develop algae technology in Ireland. This is a company in New Zealand that basically use algae technology to treat the sewage treatment of an entire city. So they have a 60-acre sewage pond and they've got algae growing on it, and from that algae they harvest it and they generate crude biofuel. Energy from the streets. This is a very novel idea, I think, and when I read this initially in New Scientist, I thought, wow, this is amazing. When you think of towns like Inishannon or any large city where you have a vast number of cars traveling in and out of the city every day, imagine if you had a scenario in Inishannon, for instance, where all that traffic from West Cork is moving into Cork City, and you had speed bumps in Inishannon. Every car weighs maybe over a ton in weight. And that's embedded energy. You're using it, but can you utilize any of that energy to create energy? And what they came up with in the United States was the concept of putting speed bumps in. And as a car moved over those speed bumps, you would have energy embedded in it in terms of the movement of pistons underneath that would generate electricity and could be transformed or tapped into fuel cells and used for lighting public lighting and for providing electricity for local communities. A novel idea. Other ones that we're seeing now are embedded energy in humans. So when you have large shopping centres, for instance, that the floor of the construction area itself would be designed in such a way that as you walk in it, the energy that you're using would be transformed into energy that could be utilised for the operation and maintenance of the facility. Electromagnetic energy. This is a very interesting one because when we look at solar power, electromagnetic energy, what they've come up with is the idea in Colorado in the United States of developing an antenna that can absorb visible light as well as radio waves. Huge advantages over solar cells. The problem with regular solar cells is that you can only generate electricity when the sun is shining, but with this you can generate electricity constantly. 90% more efficient than solar cells. Energy from grass. Ireland is a green country. We have the greatest environment in Europe in terms of growing grass, but we have to look to Sweden as examples of how they're using grass as a biofuel. Not necessarily growing energy crops, they're just growing grass. They're harvesting the grass, they're putting it into silage storage facilities, into anaerobic digestion, and creating biogas that is put into filling stations that the local authorities and public sector drive their transportation fleet out of, and their buses. Also in Sweden, they take their wastes, such as manures, wastes, and other resources that aren't necessarily regarded as waste, because we have to start thinking of these as fuels and as useful resources as opposed to waste products. They're taking agricultural slurry and slaughter waste and blood processed water as well. They're collecting it and putting it in a digester, scrubbing it and compressing it into gas for storage. They're operating in one cooperative area in Sweden, 65 buses, 10 waste collection trucks and over 600 cars on a facility that is using this waste. And West Cork has huge amount of agricultural enterprises that are quite intensive in terms of dairy, pig and poultry. All of that waste or energy is being lost. And there are great opportunities for the cooperative movement in West Cork, combined with the local communities like the Transition Towns and Sustainability Clonakilty and Transition Bandon and Bantry and everywhere else to tap into this resource. Solar, I'm not really going to deal with solar because we're not really the country that has a fantastic solar resource in regard to other countries around the world, and you can see why here, because most of the solar technology is going to be implemented in other countries. Same with geothermal. The main areas for geothermal around the world are shown in red. But I'm going to finish on this, and it's about sustainable towns and cities, because I envisage a situation in 2050 where we could have literally a situation, if we hadn't had the famine in Ireland and population had continued as normal, Ireland now would have a population in the region of 25 million people. When we had the famine in Ireland, the population in the UK, in Great Britain and Wales was 15 million. And it was 10 million in Spain. So one could expect that the population would have been around that. In the future, when we're looking at the issues of climate change and how it's going to affect wider communities across the world, more and more people are going to look to live in sustainable areas where they have access to fresh water and arable land. And we have those, and we also have the lowest population density in Europe. So we are going to see a lot more people moving to this country in the decades to come. And we need to start designing our towns and cities in regard to that in a sustainable way. And a great example of it is this town, Hammarby in Sweden, just outside Stockholm. It's basically a low-carbon town. They look at their waste as a resource, as an energy resource, and they split it into three types: combustible waste, recyclable waste, and digestible waste. This is my 4 o'clock in the morning, finishing my presentation last night. My brain. Compostable is is the word I'm looking for. If you just, well, the third, they combust it, they recycle it, and they compost it. So in their cities, in their apartments and building blocks, they have 3 chutes, and they put their waste according to those categories into each of them. They all go underground, under a vacuum system, a vacuum air system, and that material is then reused in the community. The combustible waste is put into a municipal incinerator that feeds district heating systems and provides hot water and electricity for the community. They recycle what they can, which is a priority for them, and then they compost the remainder. So that's a vast number of ideas I've given to you in terms of concepts that are there in terms of innovation and design for renewable energy. And at the end of the day, I suppose, when we look at our society and how we're going to plan in the future for the changes that our generation and the next generation are going to face, we have to realize the impact and significance of you as an individual and the influence that you can have in terms of creating these policies and environment for the next generation. I'm here today speaking to this room, and this presentation is going to be presented over the internet. So some of the concepts that I'm giving to you, you might go away and talk about them with your family and neighbors and friends. And you're developing a network that is quite extensive. So to end, I would just like to finish on this slide, which is, you know, when we're thinking about the future and we're thinking about innovation, we have to think of the fact that we are part of the planet and we have to be part of the solution to the problems that we have largely created. Thank you.